Good day, my dears. Grammar Granny is so happy to see you again. Now that you know about one important part of sentences, phrases, we're going to look at the overall structure of sentences and how these phrases go together to create them. Doesn't that sound like lots of fun? Okay, let's start with the biggest parts of sentences, and you already know them. They're on slide 15. Remember our free association game? I say subject, you say predicate. Good for you. Those are the two basic parts of a sentence. You might remember that subjects are usually the first part of the sentence, but no matter where in the sentence they come, they always tell us who or what is doing the action of the verb, because subjects are the doers in the sentence, and they're sometimes called the agents. When we analyze sentences semantically, instead of grammatically like we are now, we call the doers of sentences the agent. When we analyze sentences not for their semantic content, but for their grammatical form, then we call the doers the subject. When we assess our client's language, we can look at sentences either for what meaning they contain, their semantics, or what forms they use, their grammar or syntax. Two different ways of thinking about how our clients are communicating. So, because subjects are usually the agents of action, they're usually nouns or pronouns. As we talked about last time, we can describe these nouns and pronouns in more detail by adding modifiers, determiners, and prepositional phrases to nouns and pronouns. We can add more complex forms too, but we'll get to that later, my dears. For now, we're going to stick to talking about simple sentences only. When we add more sentence elements to elaborate the information we give about a noun, we create the noun phrases we were discussing before. The more descriptive words we have in the noun phrase, the more elaborate it is. That's why we often say that as kiddos get older, they produce more noun phrase elaboration, and their level of elaboration is related to their overall level of language. Pause the video for a minute and try to identify the subject NP in these sentences. 3 blind mice ran after the farmer's wife. The farmer in the dell takes a wife. The wife of the farmer in the dell happily takes a child. The quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog. If you said 3 blind mice, the farmer in the dell, the wife of the farmer in the dell, the quick brown fox, have a cookie. And did you notice that the third one, the wife of the farmer in the dell takes a child, has 2 prepositional phrases? Of the farmer, modifying the head noun wife, and in the dell, modifying the farmer in the first prepositional phrase. The whole thing makes up the subject noun phrase of the sentence, the elaborated noun phrase that names and describes the doer of the action take. As you'll see when you study child language development, increasing elaboration in the noun phrase continues through the preschool and school years, and it's important to literacy development because it helps our kiddies understand the elaborated language of academic texts. So, we know what the subject is. What's the predicate? The simplest way to explain it is to say that the predicate equals everything else in the sentence, apart from the subject. Now, every predicate will have a verb, because as we said, the verb is the backbone of the sentence. Stop the video for a minute and see if you can find the predicates in the sentences we looked at before. 3 blind mice ran after the farmer's wife. The farmer in the dell takes a wife. The wife of the farmer in the dell happily takes a child. The quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog. Now, if you said, ran after the farmer's wife, takes a wife, happily takes a child, and jumped over the lazy dog, good for you! You're getting the hang of it. And what are the verbs in these predicates? Stop the video and find them. If you said ran, takes, and jumped, Great job! Now, one thing that's important about the verb of a sentence is that it has to agree with the subject in person and number. If you took Spanish or some other language in high school, you might remember learning verb conjugations like these. Maybe you remember that each person goes with a certain pronoun. Yo for I, tú for you, él for he, nosotros for we. And the verb must always agree or have the right ending for the noun or pronoun in its subject. That's what we mean by agreement in person. First, second, or third, and number, singular or plural. So I, you, he, she, and it are singular. We and they are plural. Every person-number combination has its own ending for the verb to make it agree with the subject, and there are different sets of endings for each tense. So the present tense has the endings we just looked at. In the past tense, the conjugation would have a different set of endings for each person and number. So for comer in Spanish, we'd have comí, comiste, comimos, comieron, and comieron. Now, in English, things are easier. We don't mark verbs for every person and number. In fact, we only have one verb marker in the present tense, and that's the S that goes at the end of third-person singular verbs. So, I eat, you eat, he eats. We eat, you eat, they eat. And maybe because we don't do a lot of conjugating in English, the little bit we do is hard for kiddies to learn. And especially so for our kiddos with language disorders. When you start working with them, you'll notice they often make mistakes and leave off the third-person singular S marker. Here's one of the lame jokes Grammar Granny found on the internet about subject-verb agreement. A subject and a verb walk into a bar. They have a disagreement. They walks out. Get it? There's no agreement. Okay, sorry about that. Let's take another look at our sentences where we found the subjects and predicates. 3 blind mice ran after the farmer's wife. The farmer in the dell takes a wife. The wife of the farmer in the dell happily takes a child. The quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog. Now, you might have noticed that besides the verbs in the predicates, ran, take, takes, and jumped, there was some other stuff too. Some of the other stuff is prepositional phrases, like after the farmer's wife, over the lazy dog. And some is adverbs, like happily. But what about those other parts? The noun phrase a wife and the noun phrase a child. You might remember we talked before about the fact that verbs can be divided into action verbs that express doing something, like kick, like, sit, accept, think. And then there were state of being verbs that express a condition, like be, become, seem, or appear. Well, I hate to complicate things too much, my dears, but it's also true that verbs can be divided another way, into transitives and intransitives. All state verbs are intransitive, by the way. Now, transitive verbs take a direct object. They're called transitive because, in a sense, they transfer the action of the verb to the direct object. So you can send a card, love chocolate, kiss your Valentine. Direct objects are considered additional components within the predicate. Remember we said that the semantic role of the subject is the agent or the doer of the action of the verb? Well, semantically, the verb is the action in the sentence. And that's why we sometimes call verbs action words. That's their main semantic role. Direct object is another one of those semantic roles we were talking about earlier. The direct object's job or function is to receive the action of the verb in the sentence. Syntactically, in terms of form, though, these objects are noun phrases just like subjects. But they serve a different purpose or meaning in the sentence, not as the doer of the action, but as the receiver of the action instead. A trick people often use to find the direct object of a verb is to put a what question after the verb. So in a sentence like, can John make a sandwich? If we weren't sure of the direct object, we could ask ourselves, can John make what? The answer to the question is the direct object. In this case, a sandwich. Pause the video for a minute and see if you can find the verb's direct objects in these song titles. You've lost that lovin' feeling. Baby, light my fire. Please, please me. If you said that lovin' feeling, my fire, and me, have a cookie. And here's something else you might have noticed. In the last one, the objective form of the first-person singular pronoun me is used. Remember we talked about subjective and objective forms of pronouns? Well, here's an example of an objective pronoun. The objective form is always used, not surprisingly, when the pronoun is functioning or has the semantic role of a direct object. When a pronoun functions as the doer of an action in the subject, we use the subjective or nominative case. So we'd say, she, nominative, agent, outsmarted him, objective, direct object. Just a little reminder, my dears. Ta-ta for now. Let's take a break, but come back and see Grammar Granny real soon.